2025 NFL free agency predictions. We're only a couple days away from the biggest 48 hours of the NFL offseason. Teams are allowed to legally tamper with players and get them ready to sign deals. Here are my predictions for the biggest free agents in this 2025 offseason. Here's how we're doing this. There's 4 parts. There's timestamps below for all of them. We got quarterbacks, running backs, pass catchers, and other players. So defensive players and linemen. Within each of those 4 parts, there's going to be 2 additional parts. The first part of each, who is returning to their current teams, who's re-signing, and the second part are the players who are departing and finding new homes. Before we get into it, if you are new, you don't know me, my name is Max. I make football content every single day to keep you updated and informed on everything going on in the NFL world. So if you're not part of the family already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and if you enjoy content like this, make sure to leave a like. Without further ado, let's get into it. Very briefly, these are the teams with the most cap space in the NFL going into this offseason. Obviously, you can restructure, you can trade players away. That matters a ton, and the cap is real, but not as real as that raw number that I just showed you seems. Let's start with the quarterbacks. I only have 3 players who are re-signing with the teams they were on last year: Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, and Cooper Rush. I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to be able to please Sam Darnold financially, which is probably priority number 1, but also give him more than 1 year. He's not going to get another prove-it year in Minnesota. He showed enough last year that he deserves some type of longer-term contract, not necessarily a 4-year deal, maybe 2. And the reality is, as much as I like J.J. McCarthy and as good as I think he will be, the grass is not always greener. I don't want to beat a dead horse with Justin Fields. I've talked about him so much on this channel, but he was top 20 in a bunch of QB statistics last year. He's an elite rusher, took care of the football, and he's only 26 years old. He is the Steelers quarterback for the next couple years, in my opinion. And Cooper Rush coming back to Dallas, familiarity as a backup, I think it makes sense. These are the 8 quarterbacks I think will find new homes. We'll spend a couple seconds on each, but I put new in quotes because you can see Joe Flacco. I think Cleveland's going to look a lot of different ways. The reality is, we've seen it in a bunch of reports, they want to bring a veteran in. I think Joe Flacco could be the best vet that they get. The Giants need a veteran quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is going to go there and fill that void for a year. I think a lot of people sleep on what the Jets can do at the quarterback position. I know a lot of people want them to draft somebody, maybe Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders at 7, but the reality is, I don't think they're as far off as other people suggest they are. I think Aaron Glenn knows that, and I think he brings in a veteran to help them succeed. I think Russell Wilson fits their culture great. Jameis Winston wants to go somewhere and be competitive for the starting job. I really thought about him going to New England. There's a Mike Vrabel connection. He'd be a great mentor to Drake May, but I still think he wants to compete and be a starter, and I think Indianapolis is the best opportunity for him to do that. Jacoby Brissett can go to Carolina and be Bryce Young's true mentor, even though Andy Dalton is already there, restructured his contract. I still think they lean into the backup quarterback world with Brissett because, again, they are not as far off and they can't afford to let that team dip if Bryce Young, God forbid, were to get injured. I think when you find New England's backup, you want a journeyman. You want somebody who fits the culture really well. I think Gardner Minshew is the perfect fit there. This might be my hottest quarterback take. I think Daniel Jones finds his way to the defending AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs. I know it's wild to think, but he does a lot of the same things that Patrick Mahomes can do in terms of his athletic prowess. He can escape the pocket. They can move the pocket for him. He'd be a nice little gadget guy for them. I would not be surprised if he found his way to Kansas City. And to finish it, I think Carson Wentz goes back into the NFC East and is the mentor to Jaden Daniels in Washington. Now that we get into the skill positions, if you guys want me to answer any specific questions about players that you have that I do not talk about in this video, make sure to leave them in the comments. These are the 5 running backs I think will re-sign with their current teams: Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins, Rico Dowdle, Nick Chubb, and Jaylen Warren. To me, the grass is not always greener on the other side for Minnesota. When we talk about the other running backs in this free agency class, I'm going to give the Vikings another one, but I think Aaron Jones can still come in roughly $5-ish, $6-ish million per year and be the number 1 back as long as there's somebody else to spell him out. He looked good last year when he was healthy. I think the Chargers love what they have in J.K. Dobbins. I don't think they want to mess around with it. I think they bring him back. And honestly, I kind of feel the same way about the Dallas Cowboys. I could see them going for Ashton Genty in the draft, but before we even know anything about that, if you want to assign free agent running backs, you got to think about familiarity, coming back. That Cowboys team, not as bad as I think a lot of people said they were last season. Dowdle was one of the brighter spots. I don't think they mess around and let him walk somewhere else. I think for Nick Chubb, it could get to a point where the locker room is completely out on this team if they let him walk. If I am the Cleveland Browns, I may let him test the market, but I am matching any offers he gets. Now, we can be real. Nick Chubb lost a step. He didn't look like his normal self last year. But unless that number is wildly out of the ballpark that you have as a general manager, Andrew Berry, you cannot afford to potentially lose the locker room over a couple $1 million in a contract. Nick Chubb needs to be back for the other players in the locker room. You're already starting to lose it. And then Jaylen Warren, arguably the most talented running back in this free agency class. I don't think they mess around. I think they bring him back. As for the 6 that I think will be going to new teams, Najee Harris is the big name heralded. He is such a Las Vegas Raider to me. Another team that could totally get Ashton Genty. But I don't think they want to prioritize that in their minds right now. You can get Najee Harris, a little bit of a younger back compared to some of these other guys in the free agency class. You're not going to have to pay him a ton. The market's going up a little bit. But you think about what it means to be a Raider, what Pete Carroll is going to try to instill in that roster, in that locker room. I think Najee Harris will encapsulate that and be their number one guy, honestly, in a very similar role as he did in Pittsburgh. Buffalo's got some questions to answer in the running back room. Maybe you let Ty Johnson walk and bring in a guy like Javonte Williams, who at his healthiest is a pretty good back. Now, he hasn't been wildly healthy the past couple years, but he could spell things from James Cook unless they want to pay James Cook this offseason, which I think they could. If they pay James Cook, they'd probably be out on the running back market. We talked about the other Vikings running back. I think Kareem Hunt is the perfect guy to come in there, spell Aaron Jones out a little bit, keep his legs fresh. Towards the tail end of his career as a running back, I still think he looked really good last year in Kansas City. He's going to go to Minnesota, be the third down guy, be the second fiddle to a main guy like Aaron Jones, and excel. Alexander Mattison is the type of back that the Browns want. They can do a lot of different things. He's explosive enough, can get the tougher yards. I honestly think would be the number 2 to Jerome Ford. I think that's how that goes in that situation. But Ford, Madison, and Chubb, spelling all 3 of those guys out in the backfield, not necessarily having to worry about it in the draft, I think is probably the direction the Browns go. Although, truthfully, I really want them to draft Omarion Hampton. I think Cam Akers goes to Denver and fills that backup role. We saw last year he's still got some youth in his legs. And then Kenneth Gainwell, familiarity with Kellen Moore in New Orleans now. They need a backup running back. They just released Jamal Williams. To me, that makes a little too much sense for him to step in and go behind Kamara. Very similar role to what he had in Philadelphia, but probably going to get more touches. Let's talk pass catchers. And I want to make 2 things very clear before we say anything. All of these pass catcher free agency predictions are based on these 2 trade predictions. DK Metcalf going to the Chargers, Cooper Kupp going to the Broncos. The 3 big receivers I think return to their teams: Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, and Chris Godwin. All a little bit older. Love how they played in their schemes. Probably would be willing to take a little less to go back to the teams they were on. To me, that all makes sense. It's all a very similar thought process, unless somebody is willing to pay Chris Godwin top-end money, which I'm not sure they are, considering his season-ending injury and how the year ended for him last season. But we are going to have a lot of wide receivers in new homes next year, guys. I think Devontae Adams follows Aaron Rodgers to New York. He can be a mentor to Malik Neighbors, and all of a sudden, that offense in New York is significantly better than it was last year. The Texans need a slot guy. Tank Dell is going to be out the majority of the year next year, if not the entire year. That roster's still pretty much built to win in the immediate window compared to down the line. I think Christian Kirk could be the true number 2 to Nico Collins and step in and be a huge focal point in that Texans offense. Green Bay needs a true number 1. They need a guy to go catch 5-yard hitches. They need a guy who can go play on the boundary and when needed can win in the slot. To me, that is Stephon Diggs. Even though he's a little bit older, he can step in and be a mentor to all of the younger wide receivers on that team as well. I think that's a perfect fit. Drake May needs the boundary X to throw fades to every single time. It's Amari Cooper. It's inevitable. One-on-one coverage on the boundary. It's what Joe Flacco did. Deshaun Watson liked it. Everybody loves throwing to Amari Cooper. One-on-one on the boundary. You're going to get a lot of man if you're the Patriots. I think Amari Cooper there is a no-brainer. Can be a veteran if they want to go try to acquire T. Higgins. I don't think T. Higgins is going to get moved or draft somebody at 4. Amari Cooper is the perfect complement to that. The Cowboys need a little bit of multiplicity in their wide receiver room. I said it in the TikTok and Instagram reel that I made. I think Keenan Allen will go there, not demand a ton of top money, can play on the outside, can play in the slot. CeeDee Lamb can do the same thing. Brandon Cooks can do the same thing. Immediately, you're feeding into your quarterback who you just paid a ton of money by giving him another weapon in Keenan Allen. Darius Slayton is such a Pittsburgh Steeler. They need a speed guy to take the top off. You can't just have the big-bodied guys on the outside and the little quick guys on the inside. You need somebody who's a mix of both. Darius Slayton can take the top off, can win one-on-one. He is a no-brainer Pittsburgh Steeler. And we'll finish with a little reunion. I like DeMarcus Robinson going back to the Baltimore Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson loves throwing him the football. That's the reality. They need some depth at the wide receiver position. They may move on from Mark Andrews. You got to feed into the other receivers, the other pass catchers on your team if that's the case. case, I think Demarcus Robinson could be the true number 3 pass catcher in that offense. There's really only 5 big tight ends that are in the free agency market. There's some that are being thrown around in trade talks, but these 5 guys, grass is not always greener for guys like Mike Gesicki and Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz really wants to play with Jaden Daniels, and if you're Mike Gesicki, why would you not want to play with Joe Burrow? Neither of those guys are going to demand a ton of money either. I think Juwan Johnson can give the Rams a lot of different things as a bigger slot guy, as well as being that true inline tight end. I think that's almost a priority for them this offseason. Tyler Higbee's getting a little bit older, coming off the ACL injury. I think Juwan Johnson fits that offense beautifully. I do think the Chargers go draft somebody, maybe Tyler Warren, maybe Colston Loveland in the draft, but Austin Hooper can come in and be that veteran presence, can do a lot of different things as well. And I honestly think Tyler Conklin can come in and be that number 2 in Tennessee. I think they're trying to redefine who they are offensively. That's another guy who can be a big slot, or you can let Okonkwo go be a big slot. On the outside, you could be the inline guy. Multiplicity in the tight end room in Tennessee. We'll finish with the other guys, the offensive linemen and the defensive guys. There's a bunch. Patriots need a tackle desperately. Ronnie Stanley is the best one on the market. They will pay him whatever he wants. The Giants have already said they want to invest more money into the offensive line. I think Drew Dahlman comes in and you either push JMS to guard or you just straight up bench JMS, who has not been great the past couple years. Raiders need a dominant press man, speed guy, a guy who can do a lot of different things on the outside at the corner position. They'd be willing to pay DJ Reed. They have a ton of money and need to pay a DB. Reed, to me, no-brainer. Another team who'd be willing to pay a defensive leader, a freak athlete, the Carolina Panthers, paying Javon Holland to be their defensive leader. Something that slipped under the rug with this whole Joey Bosa releasing thing is the thought that maybe the Chargers want to bring Khalil Mack back. I don't think that's a crazy thought at all. I think Mack could return to LA. They still need a dominant edge rusher. Bosa's officially gone now. I think Mack could come back. Josh Sweat will go to Washington and be the number 1 pass rusher over there. They desperately need somebody. Speaking of desperately needing a pass rusher on the other side of an elite guy, on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson, Hassan Reddick going to Detroit, I think is a no-brainer for him. You can win now. Be the guy on the outside next to Aiden Hutchinson. No-brainer. The Giants have also said they're going to be big spenders in the cornerback market. I think we underestimate how financially flexible this team is right now, especially because they're not really liable for Daniel Jones' contract anymore. They get Charvarius Ward to be their true number 1. You can let Deonte Banks be the 2, Cordell Flott be the 3. I think Charvarius Ward is the perfect mix of zone man for that Giants scheme. Minnesota needs a guy who can also do a lot of different things in the cornerback room. Rasul Douglas can play man, can play zone, can play inside, can play outside. That's a no-brainer for me. Speaking of defensive leaders, Cam Bynum, who was unreal last year in Minnesota, goes to the New York Jets and revamps that secondary that was really good 2 years ago but struggled last year. Patriots need a run stopper. Milton Williams comes on the inside. No-brainer. They're going to pay him whatever he wants. Arizona needs a lot of help, whether it's along the defensive line or in the secondary. I think Byron Murphy Jr. is a big addition for them on the secondary. I also think Arizona leads into a defensive leader in Dre Greenlaw. I think he comes in, is an immediate impact player in that defense. He shores up the front 7. Again, you bring Byron Murphy Jr. in to help the secondary. Carlton Davis, to me, is the perfect physical, middle field closed player divider, go play man one-on-one in Pittsburgh. The Steelers need this guy. And to finish it off, Talanoa Hufanga returning to the San Francisco 49ers. They're getting rid of a lot of players. They may trade Brandon Ayuk. Cap space is slowly starting to open up for them. But those are my 2025 free agent predictions for the biggest names on the market. Again, if you guys have questions about other players I did not talk about, leave them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. And if you're new and you're not subscribed and part of the family already, make sure you join. In a couple days, we'll have our pre-free agency mock draft for you. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time. God bless.